we've been able to put so many smiles on young people's faces. I remember I went to a school because we do school tours. I went to a particular school and we taught them how to design using Canva. And this guy could not just like you could see him blushing. He was so happy, so excited. And I think all this is what keeps me going. I mean, basically.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of Oh My Curry Goodness, I talk to Gen Zers across different industries about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. I created Oh My Curry Goodness because in the world that we live in today, it is very easy to talk about the destinations people have reached or all the accomplishments. But I really want to focus more on the journey and the good and bad experiences that have shaped a person into who they are today. And so I really want to focus on the human side whenever I interact with a guest because it's easy to forget that at the end of the day, we are human beings. And these stories, regardless if they are good or bad, these are some of the things that make us human beings. So I hope you guys, as listeners, join me in getting to learn more from different guests, see what they went through, and in a way, it can help us open our minds in knowing that everyone has different circumstances, but regardless of what they went through, that they were able to take lessons away that help them in their own respective industry. So continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible people who are of the Gen Z generation. Now, this week I am talking to David Onilude, who is the founder of Tech Now Global, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to raise awareness on digital literacy in underserved communities. This organization was created back in 2020, and since then, David and his organization have done an incredible job of raising awareness when it comes to digital literacy. So I'm excited to be speaking with David. He is someone who I've been wanting to have on my podcast for a while. So it's great that we finally got to connect and make this happen. So, David, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness. I'm really glad that we got to make this conversation happen.
Thank you very much. So much appreciation. It feels like we're not going to have this podcast, but yeah, we are today.
No, it's always funny because it's like, okay, we got the days, we got the time, but then because of schoolwork and other things that are important, it's like, oh, when are we gonna have this? So I'm glad that we finally got to find time. And one of the things that we have, I guess, a connection on is the idea or is technology. Like I mentioned, how you are promoting digital literacy in underserved communities. And I want to start with the broad question, which is the fact that knowing that technology means a lot to you. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you study computer science. Um, and I study information systems, which is like computer science and business. So we have that in common. Tell me what technology has meant to you in your life, because what's interesting to me is I'm based in the United States, and it almost feels like technology is very easy to access. Well, not almost, seems like it is easy to access, but I know that I think you are based in Nigeria, correct me if I'm wrong, and especially when it comes to maybe countries in Africa, their relationship with technology is challenging because not everyone has access to it. So we might take things for granted, but maybe in different parts of the world, technology is like, we can't take this for granted because we know how much this has changed our lives. So, from you personally, tell me what technology has meant to you personally.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very interesting question. I think for me, both personally and professionally, that technology has been a lifeline for me. Right. So growing up in a community like Badagry, I had limited access to resources, especially educational opportunities. And I think technology opened doors that I never imagined, right? It allowed me to develop my skills. And I think technology paved the way for me because of technology and because of my access to technology at my later stage in life, uh, it made me realize that technology is a tool for progress, right? it is a bridge to empower and especially to open doors to community like my own community, right? Where young people do not have access to this, right? And I feel like the power of technology has gone beyond for me personally because uh realizing that young people don't have access to this and giving them the opportunity to have access to this is what uh begat the my initiative Techno Global. So basically, as I said at the beginning, the technology is a lifeline for me, and I don't think I take it for granted because I've seen firsthand how people lack access to technology. Technology is broad, right? Computer systems, mobile phones, and all those things, right? So yeah.
For sure, and it's interesting because, like I said, it's so difficult. It's really interesting to see that, in different parts of the world, people's relationship with technology varies, and I think a lot of people can plead guilty to this, especially in the United States. I think if we don't have Wi-Fi for about 5 minutes, we freak out. I'll plead guilty to that charge. Like if we don't have Wi-Fi, it's like, oh my gosh, when am I going to get this homework assignment done, or how am I going to be able to do this or this? So it's like you think that's the worst thing in the world, but for other people, there are different challenges, and in a way, they are life changing because it's like, life used to be like this, but with this access, it's like this. So you think Wi-Fi is bad, but in a way, technology has. If we don't have technology at all, we would suffer much more consequences
I,
than just 5 minutes of Wi-Fi. But go ahead.
so I think that like that's broad. Like I grew up in a community where we did not have access to electricity, right? Like
Right.
actual electricity. So we used to put on our gen in the evening, right? So we could be able to charge our gadget. Internet is very, very expensive, right? So I didn't have a mobile phone till I was in the university, right? And that's what I'm saying, that young people, especially in marginalized communities back in Africa, don't have access to all these things, right? Because of, as I said, marginalization. And looking at it from my own perspective, looking back at it, I realized how much if I'd had opportunity to have full access to electricity, internet, technology as a whole, I mean, it will have been a very, very wonderful experience. But I mean, to where we are today, with the little we've been able to do, it's also been a life-changing opportunity with the little access we've had. So yeah.
I know I didn't ask you this, well, when I sent you the list of questions, and we can cut this off if it doesn't serve any value, but this is for me to help me. I want to ask this because I really want to understand and learn from a little bit like other people's relationship with certain
Yeah,
things, especially
yeah,
because in the United States, like I said, we take a lot of things for granted. But for
yeah.
you, what would you say was the best piece of technology what was the best tech piece of technology that you own or owned at the time? So for example, in the United States, like when I forget when I got my first iPhone, but I remember I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And again, that comes from a place of like, well, because maybe we didn't, or no, we just didn't have that many technology issues where I was from.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But then similar to how you were talking about how in marginalized communities that like electricity and the internet, like these things were like life changing in a way. So for you personally, what was a piece of technology that you felt like meant what was like the piece of technology that you feel like you valued the most? I know you say electricity and the internet. Is it one of these things, or do you feel like there's another that comes to mind where you're like, I remember having this, and I remember thinking like, wow, this was the coolest thing in the world.
I think um for a very long time, right, it was a norms for us to not have electricity. I didn't grow up with electricity, so it's a norm, right, to get it. And as you said, for you, not having internet, it's a very, very bad thing. For me, having internet, I mean, not having internet was a normal thing. But moving forward, I think I got my first, no, not personally. I think my mommy had a laptop, a very, very old HP laptop, which we had in the house. And I think that was the first piece of technology I had that was very, very precious to me because I was obsessed with this laptop. When I mean I was obsessed with it because I could remember always wanting to come back home because in school we didn't have computers and all. So I wanted to always come back home and do Mavis Bacon. I don't know if you know Mavis Bacon game where you get to type and have to do all these things. I think that piece of technology was one of the best thing for me. I think I was age 9 or so back then. Yeah, moving forward, my mobile phone. I had a BlackBerry. I had a BlackBerry phone till I think those two things are things that looking back, I felt or I feel like those were one of the most precious things I had back then.
That's really interesting. I don't think I had a BlackBerry, but I think my first phone was a flip phone. And then I got another type of phone, and then I got an iPhone. But I just thought having a phone in itself was the coolest thing.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
I think now that I think about it, because you said you also had a laptop, I think I was also big into video games. So I thought having a PlayStation was pretty cool. And now what's really funny is now that I look back, because now that I look back and I'm like, I wish I used that time more to like read books. I wish I'm a kind of a boring, excuse me, I'm kind of a boring person right now. So like I prefer reading books, but like yeah, like when I was little, I loved playing video games. So I wish I could tell my younger self to stop playing video games and just read books because
I'm read more books. I
uh,
totally
I
relate
will
to you,
plead
man.
I will plead guilty to that as well. Like, I loved playing like the FIFA video game series too much. Yeah, well, now that I learned my lesson, but um, you know, and it's funny because I mentioned this in the beginning how I major in information systems, which is computer science and business, and I did not know what I wanted. I did not know if computer science was the right field for me until I started spending more time with coding. And so I know people go back and forth with this. I'm wondering if you resonate with this as well, David. The thing that got me into computer science was web development. So a mixture of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I remember when I first looked at my dad's computer and I said to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, because I think he was involved in Python or some other, I forget what coding language. And I saw what he did. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But then once I started working on figuring out what I want to do, I got into web development and I thought it'd be really cool to create that final product or building that website. And that ultimately got me interested in computer science. So I don't know. I mean, I know we're kind of going off topic, but
Yeah.
because you know you're majoring in computer science, I'm wondering if there was a language or an experience where you remember doing it and you were like, yeah, I want to do this going forward.
Um, I mean, I'm a software developer now, but I remember I went for a boot camp, and I saw young guys. It was an hackathon, and I saw young guys that were even younger than me. I left my village, so I went to the more developed part of Nigeria, and I saw young guys who were writing code, and I was like, "What is this? Like, what's going on here?" And I went back home, and I just decided that I wanted to be a developer. I didn't even know where to start from. Lucky for me, I had the opportunity to intern at at an innovation center where I started my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript career. And I really loved creating websites. I've created tons of websites. I've taught young guys how to create websites. And now I've evolved to now creating mobile app softwares and all those things. But I think personally, getting to see young people that are now in my community that had opportunity to this, doing what I could have done, motivated me, right? And I think it was even Scratch. It was not even a programming language. It was Scratch. I don't know if you know Scratch. Scratch is used for cartoon animations. That's what I saw. I was quite younger, and my mind was blown at the fact that wow, because then it was a big deal to me because I didn't even know what it was. Like it was quite big, but now looking back at it, and I'm like, really? But yeah.
I will agree with that. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, but I also felt like there were times where I was like, you know, I'm 1 minute away from breaking my computer because there's always something that was like, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that. But I still love coding websites today. I've learned a lot of Java lately in college. It's a coding language that I have a love and hate relationship with. There are days where you
Toxic
love it,
relationship.
and then you're just like, And then it's like, hey, I need help. Why is this not working? And it's like, oh, because you forgot this isn't you forgot to declare a variable, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
my goodness,
Just really, I get you.
why? Uh, I want to go back to you mentioned how you grew up in Badagry, which is in Nigeria, and I read somewhere that you weren't necessarily born there, but you grew up there, and you talked about how there were a lot of challenges growing up in Badagry, such as lack of access to electricity and the internet. But despite those challenges, I would love to know the positives despite the negatives that were existent at the time. So I guess in a much clearer way of saying it, I guess despite some of the issues that you had growing up, what were some of the things that you liked about Badagry that you feel like no other city in the world, like it doesn't matter, like I could put David in Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, I don't know other London, Paris, Casablanca, Cape Town, Johannesburg. I could put you in like any big city that maybe has a lot of that has a lot of that maybe has a lot more accessibility to things like technology. But despite that, clearly one of the things you mentioned is that you are very proud of where you come from. So tell me what you loved about Badagry that you maybe other cities, regardless of how big the city is or how much access to technology they have, that at the end of the day, there's something about Badagry that maybe other cities don't have. I'm so sorry for the long
Yeah, no, no,
explanation,
no
but I hope you
problem.
get what I
No,
mean with
no,
that.
no, no problem. I think growing in Badagry taught me resilience, right? To be and taught me the importance of community, right? Even though we faced or I faced access to a lot of things like electricity, quality education, but I think growing up in a community, especially in a remote rural community, gave me the sense of togetherness and like support from people, like a sense of community, right? And I also learned the value of resourcefulness and creativity, right? I learned the fact that you could create solutions from any situation you're in, any little thing you have, you could create solutions from it. One other thing I liked about growing up in Badagry is the creativity of things because I come from a very, very simple place where it is very close to the border. The beach is very close. Their lifestyle is very simple. We have trees. We get to eat fruit. I mean, the beauty of places, right? Which I mean that shaped my creativity. Um, there's positive to things, and growing up in a community like Badagry, it's a traditional setting, right? Things are done properly. Um, some values were incorporated in me, which I have now, and it is because I come from a remote community like Badagry. Values like how you respect your elderly people, right? There's certain ways you greet your elders, right? That I know if I go somewhere else, all these values are now incorporated into me. So growing up in a community like Badagry, as I said, gave me a sense of community, a sense of togetherness, right? I think I could go on and on to praise my where I come from, but I think I've answered that question.
Yeah, I really appreciate you answering the question. You talked about the importance of community, and it's really interesting because, like I mentioned, that there's obviously these big cities like Los Angeles and New York and other places, but maybe they don't have, maybe they do talk about community, but maybe it's not enforced strictly enough. Now, I grew up, I'm born in, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and people usually I think that's what I love so much about Columbus is the fact that they are very community oriented. So regardless of what your background or ethnicity is, the fact that there's always a community for you, and even if there's a community for you, and also the fact that other communities can still one way or another help you regard even if you're not a part of that community. So like for example, here's a bad example, but like I love curry. That's why I called it Oh My Curry Goodness. There could be a curry community and then maybe a community that doesn't like curry, but regardless of the differences, we still want to be able to help one another be the best version of ourselves. So I'm really glad you brought that up and I wish that more communities really focus on that because that's what I think makes cities special is not just the individual part of a person, but the collective
Yeah.
view as you want to continue to create more meaningful impact in whatever industry that may be. I now want to go into I guess, the idea of helping people. And so obviously, like I mentioned, you created an organization to promote digital literacy in underserved communities. Now, I've been thinking about how to ask. I was after I sent you this question, I was like, okay, here are the questions we're gonna topics we're gonna talk about. But then there was one question I want to ask, but please don't make me laugh when I ask you this. But I really am curious to know. So
Yeah.
obviously, you are the found. So you create an organization to help promote digital literacy in underserved communities. I am curious to
Yeah.
know who would you say was your version, who was David's version of David Onilude, in the sense of who was, like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. So like there's you, right, helping promote digital literacy, but I guess who was the person that I guess David looked up to help him kind of navigate or find his purpose. So that's why I was thinking about, like, I want to ask you in like a really funny way, which is like, who was David Onilude's David Onilude? That means
Okay, I get it. I get it. I get
that's such a
it.
bad question, but
Yeah, no,
I
no, I
guess
get it.
who was the person that kind of like helped you as you look to find your purpose?
Yeah, I think I could just split that question into different segments, right? Who
Sure.
I looked up to, who was a mentor to me, who was a role model to me. I think those are set of questions. But one thing I would say is at that time when I was younger, one of the very somebody that is dear to me, David Okiokwemi is his name or namesake. He's a very senior colleague, and he was in my community. He came from a very civilized community to my community, and he emphasized on the fact that young people have potentials. And this was somebody that took me and helped me maximize my inner potential, basically, right? He gave us the opportunity to explore. He was the one that created the innovation center where young people to come in and just do wherever you're creative people, just go ahead and be creative. So I think David Okiekwe was that David Onilude for me, right? Another person I would mention are, I think, my parents. My parents are people who definitely would let you maximize yourself. They would You tell them you want to do this, and they're like, you can do it. They give you the 100% support, right? So I think my parents also. So those two people, I think, were my David O'Neill days to make me maximize my opportunity and go ahead to create my initiatives today.
Yeah, I was trying hard not to laugh because I was like, why, I should have made this much more simpler. But no, I really appreciate you talking about that. Now, when it comes to helping people, I saw that I think one of the biggest challenges could be that when you are instilling change in different communities, I think regardless of the intention, and I've talked about this in the past, where there's the good intention that you have for yourself, but people may not be receptive, may not have a positive view on how you're trying to solve different issues. And I guess the biggest challenge that I guess the biggest enemy people can have is themselves. Maybe that's much bigger than maybe the opinions and thoughts of other people. And so I guess when you were first starting out with Tech Now Global, and I'm sure even today with the challenges that you may have, regardless of the successes you've had, when it came to the different challenges, how were you able to still believe in yourself that you had that this idea of training young people to have digital skills? Obviously that's a great intention, but maybe when you were first starting out or at the time, there were different challenges or obstacles that came along the way. How are you able to still believe in yourself that one, it was the right decision and that you should continue to keep going even when you didn't have those good days?
Yeah, I think all this is a process for me. I started volunteering for organizations when I was quite younger, 16 or so. I launched my own initiative, Techno Global, when I was 18. So all this is a process. Abi was a process for me. And it was a personal development and it was a journey to a much potential experience. But one thing that keeps me moving till now, one thing that keeps me moving, that still keeps me moving is I think they see the excitement in young people's face when you give them access to, when you show them something new, right? I remember our first project where I brought together 150 people in my community and I trained them on digital skills. So the plan was to teach them HTML, CSS, and realized that these guys don't even know how to navigate the computer system. They were very afraid to touch the laptop. I'm not trying to exaggerate. Like you put the system in their front and they're afraid of it in a sense that, wow, this is a laptop, this is a computer. They don't know how to open a folder, they don't know how to navigate it. But deep down, there is this excitement that, wow, this is a laptop. Wow, I can open a folder, right? You teach them how they can write on Microsoft Word. Now realize how they can open their first web page with HTML. Like there's this joy that comes from within them that they will keep talking about it. They keep telling their friends this is what they've done. Their excitement to show their colleagues what they've been taught, what has been passed down to them. I think this is what keeps me moving. This is what keeps me going. And that's been it for me because the reality is there have been bad days, right? But the thoughts of, I mean, if I don't do this, this young boy, would he be excited? Would that would not be fair on my part because wow, I mean, I don't want to talk too much, but we've been able to put so many smiles on young people's faces. I remember I went to a school because we do school tours. I went to a particular school and we taught them how to design using Canva. And this guy could not just like you could see him blushing. He was so happy, so excited. And I think all this is what keeps me going. I mean, basically.
I do want to talk a little bit more about Tech Now Global, but there is one question I do want to ask you while you were talking about the passion you have for technology. And similar to how I said that in Java, or whenever I did Java, I described it as like a love-hate relationship. And so I guess what I want to ask you is, even though you do love coding, you're big into
Yeah.
computer science, what are some things you don't like about your passion? Because even though passions can be a great thing, I, similar to coding, it can be, well, I mean, we are talking about coding, but when it comes to, I guess, passion itself, you will enjoy it, but there are also times where you don't like your passion. And it's very easy to think that just because you're passionate about something, it means that you love every step of the way.
Yeah, so I think chain making is my passion, right? And chain making comes with a whole lot of load, right? And I think one thing that I don't like doing is the planning stage, right? When you want to plan a project. So we had a boot camp where we had to bring together 40 schools together, right? And the process of going to these schools to write letters to them, to seek permission, to direct you to this office, to make sure you drop this letter. The process of trying to make impact is one thing I don't like. I'm not trying to gaslight you because it comes with a whole lot of loads, right? That is one thing. I think another thing I don't like about this whole chain making thing is I don't know how to say it, but putting my face out there, right? Because Techno Global is not David Onilude's thing, right? I'm opportune to be the founder, I'm opportune to be the leader, but I have a lot of young people that work with me, right? And most times I want to push them in front and they're like, David, go, go, go. I don't like putting my face out there too much. I think that's one thing I don't like doing too. But basically, the process of trying to make impact, because there's a whole lot of process, because chain making comes with you being a good leader, right? How to coordinate young people together, because it's one thing to make impact, it's one thing to collaborate with people. And there's a whole lot of process when we talk about collaborations, right? For me to collaborate with your organization have a lot of policies that have to follow. And I'm like, I just want to make impact. Do we really have to do all this? Can we not just skip to the part of let's just make this impact? So I think there's a whole lot of paperwork that I mean, because I write a lot of code, I could just skip all these things. Can we not just skip it? But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I know. I thought about asking you this question because, obviously you're very passionate about helping people and you really want to see Tech Now Global grow. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about in a broad sense when it comes to that idea of change making. Even though you like it, I'm sure there are things where you're like, wait, it can be a difficult process. The last few questions I have before I let you go, I another funny question I want to ask you is I know that Tech Now Global is not a person. There's obviously a group of people that make that organization what it is. But given that you are the founder of that organization, imagine if Tech Now Global was a person. I don't know what that
Yeah.
person would look like, but just imagine that it's a person. How would you describe the relationship with Tech Now Global? Because it's very easy to think that when you are meeting someone who's known for a certain thing, like, okay, Hamza is the host of Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. I see my podcast as a friend. I don't see it as like my wife or my best friend or something too close. It's like it's more of like a casual relationship. With Tech Now Global, do you view your organization as like a friend of some sort? Do you view it as your wife, your girlfriend? I know that's a really weird question,
Yeah, yeah, I
but
think I
how
get
would you
this.
view it?
So a friend of mine, so I posted, I had an interview, and a friend, I used my Techno Global's t-shirt for the interview, right? And a friend of mine came into my DM that, David, the way you carry this, your t-shirt on your head, I really, really love it. He was trying to pull my legs, right? And it gave me a sense of the type of relationship I have with Techno Global. Wherever I'm speaking, I feel like, in as much as I say Techno Global is a group of people working together, I am Techno Global. And I take it very, very passionate, right? I mean, I'm opportune to lead another organization, right, called Bearer Software, which is another thing. But Techno Global is my first love, apparently, because it is chain making for me. And when you talk about chain making, I think it goes back to what products have you done to make sure that you're making change? And one thing that I know that I've put in place to make sure that chain keeps on going is my organization, my nonprofit organization called Techno Global. So as I say, the type of relationship I have with Techno Global, I don't know. I think it's a very love at first sight kind of thing. You know, when you're in your talking stage kind of relationship and you're like too obsessed with yourself. Yeah, so that's that relationship I have with Techno Global. What I'm just trying to say is I'm Techno Global and I deeply, deeply am passionate about it. And I'm sure that I cannot do three statements without talking about Techno Global. So yeah.
No, that's really interesting, and I was just laughing because it's like such a weird question. But I'm glad that you were able to talk about that relationship. I don't want to keep you too long because I know it's getting very late where you are. So I would just want to ask you two questions. They're kind of the same thing, but I still want to know your thoughts. So I guess for you personally, what are some things that you want to do in the future that you haven't been able to do yet? Either because maybe it's just a difficult challenge or because, like we mentioned in the introduction, there's just a lot of things going on. So it's kind of prevented us from being able to reach, it may have been an obstacle that has prevented you from getting what you want. So what is something you want to do in the future, and what are some things you hope to see Tech Now Global achieve in the future?
I think talking about technology, about one thing I've always wanted to do is to build a community of young people who are tech savvies, right? Basically, that's like the whole summary of everything that technology about does. And I want to create hubs, innovation centers in every community in Nigeria for a start, right? And that's one thing I look at, that regardless of your community, you have access to technology, and not just technology, you have access to digital skills, right? And when you have digital skills, you're self-sustainable. And when you're self-sustainable, you have a job, basically. So, and it all boils down to quality education, right? Because when you have quality education, a friend of mine used to say quality education is a balanced education. And a balanced education, it's an all-round type of education where you have everything sorted. And digital literacy is a core of having quality education, right? So I think my goal is just to make sure that regardless of your community, regardless of your location, you have access to digital skill, you have access to opportunity, right? And a digital hub is one thing that I really look forward to create in communities for people to have hubs like I once had the opportunity to have. You have a lot of technology to play around with. So I mean, not just soft skills this time around, hard skills, right? And young people to be able to use these skills to solve global problems and be solution givers or problem solvers on a global scale. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure that, I mean, obviously you have a lot of exciting things going on, not just with Tech Now Global, but for you personally. And so I'm really excited to see where you can take it. And I hope that so many more people are able to look at this organization as a thing that helped them in their personal lives. So, David, continue doing the incredible work, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was great to finally make this conversation happen. I know a lot of things can get in the way, but best of luck with everything from Techno Global to personally, and I hope we get to be in person someday.
definitely, definitely. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.